Welcome, gentlemen. This is Divorce and Custody, our workshop. And this is part one of a 5-part series that we're going to be doing over the next week here at Austin Men's Development. This is streamed live on our Facebook group. Welcome everybody there. There's questions that are being written in and so on. And for the first part of this presentation, what we're going to do on all 5 days is we're just going to cover a slideshow or a certain piece of content going over something very specific. And today's is somewhat of an introduction, but we're going to get into a lot. And I'm going to cover that here in a second. We're going to get into the legal stuff, which, man, there's a ton there. That could be how to find a lawyer, how to switch lawyers, all that sort of stuff. That could be like how you strategize your case and so on. And obviously, we're not lawyers here. This could be on the mental health issues going on with you or your spouse or your ex or whoever you're in a battle with. And this is going to be stuff on fatherhood and the road after. There's so much to it here. But in this one, what we're going to be going over is how divorce does not have to ruin your life. And that's a huge thing, right? That's massive. And a lot of guys walk into this and they're just terrified of what this whole experience is, and that makes sense, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. This isn't something where I'm going to give you a quick fix or a hack. This is a very, very complex issue, very difficult. And in that sort of difficulty, there's a lot of moving parts and it can go wrong in a lot of ways. We're going to try and help you do the best possible way of handling this tough situation. So let me get this squared away with the slideshow. Our first slide that we have here is just the title one, and divorce and custody. And this is a workshop to one of man's greatest challenges. And this is something that I also want to put out there, that this is going to prove to be a big rite of passage for you. And it's something that is so important. And when we talk about rites of passage, this is one of those things that oftentimes as men, we see it as, we were neglected in terms of a rite of passage with our life, or we were unable to go through this big challenge that we had as a young man. And we see that in our culture, and, all of the men's industry talks about this. But this is one of those things where we have a massive rite of passage. Everything about us is changing. We're being challenged at ways that we had never thought before. And it's just a massive, massive thing. What this workshop is going to cover, like I said, this is only part one. And I just want to warn you guys, this is the introduction. And what we're going to cover here is an overview of everything and a lot of the mindset you're going in that you have right now and what's going to happen in the end. Okay. Very, very important to understand that, because when we get to things like divorce fundamentals, we're going to cover a lot of the legal game. That's tomorrow. That's part 2, right? When we get into man post-divorce, that's what we do afterwards and what your life could look like and what you do need to do right now for that. And these are very specific things. When we get into mental illness and relationships, that's going to deal with very specific things. And these are topics that we hear men talk about a lot. And I'm going to tell you right now, what you're going to get in this and what you're going to get from this is going to be very unique and different from a lot of the other stuff out there, because when it gets to these issues, man, they can go wrong in a lot of ways, and we can predict them for you. We can chart them out. They may not sound like they're the reality right now, but I can almost guarantee they're going to happen. And why? Because, we've been doing this for 15 years and literally done this for thousands of guys. So really pay attention. And of course, I'm going to tell you right now that what we're covering here in this workshop, what I'm leading you through, it doesn't mean that you don't have to be responsible for it. This is some big stuff. If you need to hire a lawyer, which most likely you will, you've got to hire a lawyer. If you need to get some mental health help, you need to do that. This doesn't replace any of that. So very important to take a look at. Also in the links down below, wherever you're watching this, there are a lot of resources that we've already done for you in this. Now, one is a free PDF. There's a link there, and it's basically the Single Dad's Guide to Divorce and Custody. Even if you don't have kids, this is a great PDF to look at. It's going to cover a lot of the fundamentals that we're going to talk about in this workshop. Obviously, this workshop is going to be much more thorough, but it's a good starter guide and a good way for you to go like, man, maybe I should rethink some of this stuff. Okay, so then we have We have men's development excellence. So divorce and custody, the survival guide for men. Let me talk about that first. That's a 4-part video series. We have ebooks that go along with it. It's extremely thorough. Man, it's massive, right? So it's about 8 hours of content where we break down everything you need to know about divorce. That is a product that's standalone, but if you sign up for Men's Development Excellence, it will be in there. Now, Men's Development Excellence is a community of, man, it's been around for a long time. So like I said, I've been teaching, or we've had these groups of men for 15 years, but for the last 11 years, we've had an online group that has never stopped. It's always been there, and it's highly active. So the Austin Men's Development Board is a free message board, and it comes with free group problems. You know, a lot of guys that aren't invested. Men's Development Excellence is that part of that group that's been around for 11 years of guys that are invested, that are working on themselves. And quite literally, those guys have been working on themselves, from 2009. There's guys that were still that were on those calls that are still on the calls today. Those are some great resources for you. They're in the links down below. And I want you to take a look at them. And if you're serious about this, I highly recommend being involved. But for now, this is something that is free, that you can look at, and it's meant to be a resource that can work, stand alone. And what you're going to find is there's a lot of complexities, especially when we go through, especially the legal stuff or the mental illness stuff. There are a lot of complexities that if you're not a part of a community, it doesn't have to be ours, but we're made for this. You're really going to run into some walls, and you're going to see that. So let's get to this first part. So right now, I just want you to know that if you're going through a separation, a divorce, or a custody battle, anything like that, you're going to be all right. Okay. You're going to be okay. And that's really important to know. And we're going to get into the details of what that's going to look like. And I get it that this sucks, right? It's terrible. It's a tragedy. It's a huge problem that has happened, and it should be seen that way. This is something where it's a tragedy because it is breaking a commitment of life. It's supposed to be hard, right? So this is terrible, and it's supposed to be terrible because right now for yourself, you're breaking a commitment of, a vow that you may have taken, a bond that you have with fatherhood, feeling perhaps betrayed or feeling guilt of betraying somebody. These things are huge and they're massive, and it seems like one of the biggest failures, and it is a failure. I'm not here to tell you that it's not. This is something which is truly terrible for you, So if you want to honor your family, if you want to honor yourself, if you want to honor your kids, if you want to honor that vow in the best possible way, we need to understand that there's a process to this, that there's a process to really changing your life around it. And that if you don't do it, you really end up in a bad spot. And we're going to talk about this here in a second, because there's basically 2 roads that you can take in this. And one road is fixing things and repairing it. And that's what I would suggest you need to do to honor this big break in your family. And, but there's also a road of denial, depression, blame, anger, and these things that we see men get caught in for years and years and years. And it takes a long time. So I want to start off here by telling you my story. So, first off, look, I'm Steve Mayeda. If you don't know me, I founded this group. I founded it a long time ago. I've been coaching for 15 years. I've worked with guys at a high level. I specialize. I started out as a dating coach, still talk a lot about that, which you're going to find in my groups. There's always a discussion about dating, sex, and relationships. And we'll kind of get into the story of that here in a second. Don't have any shame in that. In fact, I think it's one of the bedrocks of masculinity, but also a bedrock of masculinity is this rite of passage. And also specialize big time in addiction. That's a huge element of it, whether that's sex and relationships or drug addiction and these types of things. Also big time on divorce, there's a lot of content being made about that, and you'll find out why. So I want to kind of talk about this element here. These slides, I put together, and I just want to make some sense out of it for you, is that one of the first big roadblocks of my life was abuse and addiction, and huge. And in growing up, I grew up with great parents, great family, all this sort of thing. I don't want to add any disrespect to that. Awesome people. But within my childhood, there was definitely abuse that happened. There was addiction that happened. And by the time I was 14, I already had drug problems. And by the time I was 17, I had overdosed multiple times. I was in and out of rehab and all this sort of thing. Big time trauma in my life. My first sexual experience, the girl, after dating for a week or so, a real short amount of time, she had gotten kidnapped and assaulted, and this kind of started out my sex life. My 20s was really interesting because there was a lot of crime. So I got sober, or got clean, from about 17 to 20. So just shy of 3 years. A lot of stability happened in that, but the abduction and the kidnapping, all that sort of stuff, really threw things for a curveball. Ended up, starting to drink again, getting really involved in art. I worked as an artist. Amazing times. Didn't care about money or success, anything, kind of things that you do from 20 to 30, perhaps, or at least for me. I learned a lot of things the hard way, as you're going to see. So by the time I was 28, man, I was pretty far gone. In fact, I just was going through a bunch of videos. I shot a documentary when I was, I think, 28, and brand new dad, trying to quit using drugs. Man, it was just tough. Right before my son was born, I had really tried to stop using, and for the most part, I did, but I just didn't do anything to change those habits about my life. Basically living off of stealing stuff, every once in a while waiting tables, every once in a while taking pictures for a living, all these different types of things going into it. I also worked professionally in theater. A lot of weird things going on, as anybody you could imagine in their 20s. So basically what had happened was I became a dad, and it wasn't really expected, and I didn't know what to do, and I had no idea of how it was. And to go through this transition of being this crazy misfit to a father was tough. It was a rocky relationship. I tell anybody, or tell everybody, it's like, man, anybody who could find love in me at that time had to have some issues themselves. And no disrespect to my oldest son's mother, but we both had problems clearly at that time and going into it. I was a terrible boyfriend. It's interesting because in this, I was writing out, as you're going to find out in this process, especially when we get to the fifth part of it and so on, some tools to rebuild yourself and so on. There's a lot of journaling and self-reflection that come into play. And so I've written about this a lot in my life and done lots of inventories. But man, I basically, I was, in my mind, I was not in this relationship with her. But in reality, I was. And it was like it was going in both directions. In all that chaos of crime and destruction and early fatherhood for myself, I was dating other people. I was seeing other people. I was trying to make things work with her. We'd break up. We'd get back together at both times. And so we ended up having a second child. And in that time, we were both dating other people. It was all crazy, both pregnancies. And I was just totally nuts. Eventually we split apart, and it was really traumatic for her. And for me, I just went off and did my own thing and went back into the chaos of things. Now, in all of that, in that whole thing, I got clean again. So at 30 years, I got clean. And there was that window of my first son being born from 28 to 30 and my second son being born, where it was just, I was trying to get clean and got it. I don't want to say for good, because you never really say that in recovery. But at 30, really stopped a lot of stuff. And that's when a lot of things in my life changed. So at the time I was already coaching men. So this is crazy. It's like they always say, a mechanic always has a broken car, or, those types of things. Right. And so here I am at 30 years old and at 29, so on 28, started coaching men and these types of things, and in the men's dating industry and all that sort of stuff. But man, in that time, I made a big transition myself. And in that big transition, wow, man, let me tell you, a lot started changing, and it really became amazing. Recovery became a huge part of my life. Sex, which also could be, which is definitely addiction for people, sex and relationships became a huge part of my life. Women became a huge part of my life. And that's where you really saw the message in what I was coaching is like, well, there's something more to this here. Like sex isn't bad. Women aren't bad. We can use them in all these, terrible ways. And they can manifest bad things in our lives and bring bad things out, but they're good things. And at the time, trying to be a father. Well, in that, the volatile relationship between the mother of my kids and myself became worse. And there weren't guides on how to do this. And also my own maturity level, there probably were guides. I don't want to say that, but there wasn't as big of a coaching industry that we see now, right? So between between their mother and myself, there was a bigger divide. I didn't get a few things. And this is something which is going to be important as it unfolds. And I'm telling you this story so you can know the depth of what I'm talking about with it. I thought it was okay to remain enemies with her and do whatever stuff. From 2010 to 2012, I basically had this volatile relationship with her and multiple false abuse claims she put on me. A couple times CPS picked them up. I had to hire attorneys. They got thrown out. There was stuff that her family did. Her family had a repeat pattern of doing this. And again, I want to put this in perspective because I'm not saying this to pigeonhole her. I'm saying this to tell a story. And if you get from this story that I'm angry at her or throwing her under the bus or anything like that, that's the wrong message here. And so many men go through this and it's really tragic. But the answer to this is not that we're going to go after women who have these problems, because I played a huge part in this a huge part, right? And the detriment is that you're going to find out really resulted for the bad stuff. The worst part, the suffering that I got was nothing compared to what my kids got. So in 2012, well, let me just go through this a little bit more thoroughly here. So in 2012, I got child abuse claims put against me. They turned into charges that went into a criminal trial and all this sort of crazy stuff. And within that, I'm already mentoring men. I started mentoring men way back when I was 28 years old, 43 now, and all this chaos, right? I'm clean. I think at that point, 4 years clean, which was really tough because, when you enter into recovery, you usually let go of the life of crime and so on. And then, all of a sudden I'm in jail and have to hire a lawyer, go through this whole thing. And at the same time, trying to be a father, not knowing what that is. And my fatherhood then at that point was basically arguing against the mother. And that's just not a good spot to be. So in 2012, that's when the criminal charges of injury to a child came upon me. There's something that I fought. It was terrible. There's a lot of crazy stuff in that whole legal process. I could tell you about it. There's things that I wish I would have done, which I'm going to tell you about more. I hired a lawyer. We did our research on a lawyer. And it was probably not the right choice. Great lawyer, but ended up having a lot of problems that went through. And we'll talk about this in tomorrow's presentation about attorneys, which there's a ton I could tell you about. If you want to know more about attorneys, there's a YouTube video where I interview an excellent attorney, somebody who ended up representing me and doing amazing work. So I lost custody of my two sons. I remember the day I got a protective order put on me. So that attorney that I got in 2012 did a great job because he was established in this sense, is that he got me a grand jury trial, which is basically you speak to, like whatever, 9 exemplary members of society, and you can actually make your case there if it gets thrown out or not. It's kind of an odd situation. Some stuff I was really unprepared for. My attorney attempted to prepare me, but it was difficult. And there were multiple things that happened in that, which I want to talk about in the legal case, because there was that as well as a protective order that was a hearing. And oh man, it was just crazy. So in the grand jury trial, they almost immediately decided that a protective order would be upheld. And I remember when I found out that news, It was for 2 years, I believe that protective order was, and I was devastated. I was so devastated. That day, I could tell you a lot about it, but you want to understand like the greatest amount of pain that I've felt. I felt a lot of pain. That's one of those days. And man, there's a lot I could talk about that day, because when we get into trauma and dealing with heavy stuff, what I did that day is very important. So then shortly after that, was trying to date and so on. It was always, so I just want to be clear, like for better or for worse, in a lot of cases worse, I never had a problem with women. I was a dating coach for a reason. It was very easy for me to meet women. And at the time when this was all going down, I was getting out of a relationship that was 4 years that was really great. And that was with an amazing woman. We tried all sorts of different relationships. So I was out of that relationship. Then this bomb gets dropped on me of where I can't see my kids. And then I wasn't expecting it, met this amazing woman and started a new relationship with her. Was not expecting it. Didn't think it was going to happen. Wasn't wanting anything serious. It was like 6 months out of whatever relationship, and started a new family. And that was amazing. From 2012 to 2019, I had 2 more sons. So a total of 4 boys, right? For somebody that never wanted kids, that was pretty crazy. I ended up getting reunited with my other sons in 2017, I believe the year was, which was awesome. Actually, I think it was it may have been 2016. But man, that was unreal. That was so amazing. Had this huge family. My business did better than ever before. I was in business 2005, and in 2006, starting to take money and get clients, but I never really cared about it that much. In 2010 was really when things started to turn business wise. But from 2012 to 2019, man, just amazing things happened. Started to work professionally in addiction, which was a true joy, a great, great thing. There's a speech that didn't get released until 4 years later from the 21 convention, which I used to host, but left it when they got like really political and so on. That speech, about addiction, that was in 2016, and it was just really good stuff. Started to really work intensely with that. And then in 2019, it was really unexpected from me. Being married is very difficult and very hard, but, I was in it for life because, mainly, I've lived everything that I've wanted with women. All my bucket lists checked off, all that sort of stuff. I was happy. It was great, man. So any compromises, I talked to a lot of divorced men. They're like, man, I never had the sex life of dating a lot of people. These are all things that were truly checked off for me, which made it very, I want to say easy in some ways for a relationship, but made it obviously difficult with the different communications that come in. So unexpectedly separated. And in that, I was already coaching men, big time on divorce and custody stuff because I had some wherewithal about it. Just from my previous stuff, I had interviewed a bunch of lawyers since. I had seen what had gone wrong in my case, where in my 2012 case, I had to take a plea. It was just terrible. There's so much that could go into that. It was totally effed up. Now, let me just tell you something about that. In that 2012 moment, I had people that I had known through, whether that was through the 21 convention, through the different communities, through the fitness communities, through whatever. And because of that charge, man, like so much changed. My ex, who was at the time, and again, like this is what happened. And the moral of the story of this is that things can amend in good ways. Things can really get better. And if we hold on to a lot of the anger, it screws everything up. We need to be angry at times. We need to blame at times. We need to be able to say what reality is at times, but also we need to realize that there's a further story that goes into it. So when it comes down to all of this is, man, I had like my reputation smeared. It was like, the mother of my kids was telling everybody I was this monster. I had very important people around town who for years did not talk to me. And I didn't really know they were angry with me until a little bit later, but saying that I was like this disturbed monster, that this abusive father, that I tortured my children, all these things being said, it was really tough, So that's a huge blow. And, your reputation being ruined is nothing compared to not seeing your kids, but that's one more thing of just getting down on yourself. And thankfully, so this is why I put addiction is such a big thing, is I had my mentality broken by the time I was 17, and my first real introduction of what recovery life was like, which is really about self-responsibility. And man, in 2012, when I'm whatever, 34, whatever age I was, I knew that the lower levels of anger and blame and retaliation or revenge, all things that I wanted to do and all things that I felt justified to do, were things that would not help me, and that there was another path that I had to follow. And that's really important. So in teaching all of that, it was like, okay, what did I do wrong? How do I handle the legal process right? What was I naive about? Like, what is my responsibility in all of this? Sure, I got victimized in these ways, and in massive ways. I mean, like really terrible ways, but how do I fix them? How do I not repeat these mistakes? What is the wreckage of my past? How am I choosing my relationships poorly? What's going on, and so on. And so by the time 2019 hits, man, I am established. I know a lot of attorneys in town. I know what the law is. I know a lot of the therapeutic community. I know a lot of the rehab communities. I'm literally plugged in. By 2019, when my wife wanted a separation, and we decided to go that route, I knew I had plugged in with some of the best people. So legally, I knew exactly what to do, who to talk to. Therapeutically, I knew, who to talk to, what was going on, so on. I had so much experience myself with working with people in a volunteer basis in addiction and in a professional level with addiction, in terms of, the roadmap to this. I mean, this was my career of working with men on it. Like I knew exactly what was happening, but when you're in the forest, man, it's hard to see it beyond the trees. And so to know where to go, like I had things in place, an excellent community and so on. So this began like something that was really, really awesome. And I want to tell you that from 2019 to now, 2021, it's been one of the greatest changes of my life. And this is what has come to for so many guys who've gone through this, so a lot of internal work, made a lot of money and so on, became more successful in these ways, built more self-identity, all this sort of stuff, went deeper into psychology and therapy and so on, and all this different stuff. I want to back up to a little bit about the situation as well, is when my ex and I split, which also I want to just articulate, like anger and blame and defaming somebody is not the way, but just to put things in factual perspective, the first thing that she tried to do, because when people get divorced and separated, they're insane. So the men are insane and women are insane. And we're going to talk about that, especially in lesson 4, when we get into mental illness and these types of things, because she did things which were totally nuts. And I was nuts too, right? The big difference is that, so even though I did these things, I'm still nuts, right? So it's a big change. Like you could be going through this. You need to realize that you're not thinking straight. What did I do? I got a team of people around me that were from my own communities. I got therapeutic help from the psychological and therapeutic community. And I went deep, once again, into recovery. So I had a lot of people around me. If I wasn't able to make a decision myself, if there was any big decision, I ran it by other people, had people constantly around me, helping me. And then legally, man, I let the lawyer do his job. All right. Now, in that, he could probably argue. I'm about to do an interview with him next week. He could probably argue and say like, Steve, you probably could have chilled out with these things. But especially like when I work with people that he's worked with since my case, man, I did a pretty good job. So in that whole process, man, she immediately tried to use my old case against me. She tried to say that I was dealing drugs, trafficking women and sex. And we'll talk about the details of the legal case in tomorrow's thing because it's really important. You got to realize, like, I have a criminal charge of injury to a child, and she is trying to use that against me to say I can't see the kids because she's panicked in her female craziness of what happens in a divorce because everybody's nuts. She tries to use that. She tries to divide the families. It's a script that everybody follows, both men and women in this. She won't let me see the kids. She takes off. She does everything on social media of what probably your ex or soon to be ex is doing is like, I'm good, I'm amazing, female empowerment, I'm on top of the world, I'm the woman that is, took the chance and I'm winning and all this sort of stuff. I'm still hot, all this sort of thing. And in the meantime, basically lying about it. And so what I did was mentally, I knew where to go. I knew what to do, overreacted as little as possible, cut communication with her. And legally, if you guys know the story, and we're going to talk about it in tomorrow's, I completely destroyed her in court. And she came in with, this guy has abused the kids. I'm going to get all the witnesses I know. This didn't happen, but she threatened it. I'm going to get my mom. I'm going to get my brother to say that he was abusing our children, that he can never see the children again, that whatever it needs to take for that to happen, whether that's jail. And by the end of our first wave of depositions, there were multiple things where she could have gone to jail on multiple counts. So I want to put this in perspective because when we get to gossip and what your ex is doing and what you're doing, that is not necessarily the legal route of what you need to go. So I didn't do any of these things, and this is important of why, but we had her at the end of that on child abuse, her defending child abuse. We had her on drug use. We had her lying about literally everything. There were multiple other charges, which are separate cases where I could have charged her with things like sexual assault. I could have charged her with, like conspiracy and all these other things. And these are all separate cases that could happen, but they don't mean anything in terms of separating alimony. Well, some of it does. They don't mean anything in terms of who gets the kids. That's your custody case. So divorce and custody are very specific legal cases. And when we talk about gossip of like, well, she drinks too much. Okay, well, what does that have to specifically do with the kids? Like, is that gossip or is there factual evidence? And one of the things that I do want to talk about too, in terms of her story with all of this, is she lied to her attorney. She believed her own lies. She probably still does. We can easily do that in our culture these days. Her attorney was blindsided. Her attorney didn't know what to do. My attorney knew everything about me, all of the good and all of the bad. I'm telling you, this is why it's like we can talk about it in this workshop. I'm going to answer questions for you guys. But if you're not in something like Men's Development Excellence or some program, it doesn't have to be mine, that is geared to really working you through this, man, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. So if I didn't have a team around me to help navigate through this, and I'm trying to go through what is evidence of her potentially abusing the kids and what is gossip, I'm going to have to do that with my lawyer, who's $350 an hour or whatever, $500 or $200 or whatever you're paying. And I'm going to waste a lot of money. If I'm going through with my friends and family who are my yes men, I need my friends and family, but they're not specifically geared to help me go through that, then my lawyer's going to get blindsided. And that's what she did. I assume she talked to her friends or her family about how the court system works. And man, she blew it. And it's one of those things where, like, I was encouraged very early on, within a week of our separation, by multiple attorneys that I knew and trusted, that were in town, that knew the laws of Travis County, of where this was happening. You need to go hard. You need to do these things. Handle the resentment later. Resentment's not good. Hating your ex is not good. Wrecking her life and her reputation is not good. That's not good for the kids. But you have to do this because she is going at you hard. And the stats that I was given in this is about 1/3 of divorce cases go hard. And about 1/3 of those, so it's actually a very small percentage, get taken to, trial. And by going hard, it means like making up false abuse claims and so on. So it's about 1/3. That's a lot. But then about 1/3 of those get picked up into drug charges for the male or abuse charges for the male, which happened to me. That already happened, and I didn't want it to happen again. So, man, right from the start with that, went in the right direction. So very, very important. How that all unfolded was she was still belligerent about stuff. I mean, it's a videotape deposition. It's all on record. It's really, it would be the reason why why we stopped it was because it would be stupid if she went to trial, which would then incriminate her in massive ways. So she had to settle. She still didn't agree to a settlement for 9 months, and that was a long time to eat. So for 9 months, she went back and forth with the kids. Coronavirus happened. She used that. We eventually had to force her. Her lawyer fired her. She tried to, this could be hearsay, but she tried to sue her attorney or threatened to sue him or something like that, which was ridiculous. There's just so much evidence going against her, but we eventually had to force her to settle, and we waited on that 9 months. And that force was we went in front of a judge, and in that hearing, it just immediately she caved and didn't know what she was doing and got custody established. And then, we used force to get there, but we used force in a way where it wasn't, I didn't press the charges against her. I didn't go for the full custody. And the reason for that is because, one, I've coached so many men through this and seen how bad it affects the kids. And also with my own kids, that was a huge thing. So let's go to how does this all affect you, right? So how does this all go back to you? I'm somebody that I have a story. There's a lot of flavor to it. There's a lot of things that I could say about it. There's a lot of different opinions that I have to it. But right now, what looks good to you could be, how do I get my family back? How do I get my kids back? How do I get to see my kids every night? I don't want to be a weekend dad. I want to be their dad every night of the week. I want my wife to tell me this is all a mistake. I want the bad dream to be over. How do I save my family? How do I clean up my mess? How do I leave my family, but then get things good and so on? So I can't help you with any magic wand situation to this. Now, if you get any of my stuff or you go through Divorce and Custody, the Survival Guide for Men, which is a part of MDX, you're going to find there's an entire module. One of the 4 modules on there is all on, can I save this? And if we save this, there's a big road. If you are to save your marriage and your relationship, which I want you to do, that's the number one thing, the best thing that can happen straight up for your family, for your kids, for you, that would be the best situation. You have to inventory it. You have to work it. You have to be able to fix the problems which are causing the problems. And if you don't do that, they're just going to happen again and so on. What I want to help you with is how you can take this road of the reality of it. And so the reality of it is much different than what you may want right now. And there's 2 paths to that reality. Okay. And these are real clear. This isn't like some scare tactic. This isn't like, oh my God, if you don't do this and take the red pill or whatever, you're fucked for life. This is literally like how it plays out. And you can go both directions. And I see people do it all the time. So there's the 2 paths. There's the path of fixing yourself. It's going to take 12 to 24 months. And that's what I call the Rite of Passage. Whether you separate or stay together, that path is the same. It is literally the same. You work on yourself. You work on managing very complex things in your relationships, whether that's with your kids or with, your professional life, your reputation, all these different things. Like you have a lot to work on. And that is the path that you have. Whether you stay together or you separate, that is that path. It is you, and it is self-ownership, and it is very, very complex. I want to explain it more, and that's why it's a 5-part series that still won't be enough time to take you through this. But it has to do with your mentality. It has to do with your emotions. It has to do with managing your ex. It has to do with the right and wrong ways of dealing with that. It has to do with the legal issues around it. It has to do with your commitment to being a father and what that means. And there are so many unique qualities in that. It is massive. And then there's the other path, which is denial, anger, and depression. And in the path of denial, anger, and depression, that's real easy to fall into because both these paths start in the same place, right? So whether you end up separated or together, you start in one place where you're angry, where you're in denial, you're depressed, you're blaming. If we start to take that road and we move into this thing where we start to fix ourselves, we start to fix our lives, we start to lose the anger, the denial, the depression. One of the key factors in all of this thing is if you see a guy and he's like, 6 months, 2 years, well, 6 months, you're still going to be angry. You can be happy at times too. You're going to be angry. You're going to be in denial. You're going to be depressed. You're going to have those things. I still have anger. Why would I not? What's wrong with that? But the thing is do I commit to letting that pass, to letting that go, to letting that transform into something else? So either way, we're going to start with anger, denial, blame, judgment, confusion, thoughts of retaliation, fairness, all this sort of stuff. But do we stay there and do we transition out of it? And that's real important. And the sad part about it is when it comes to denial, anger, and depression is our society rewards it in so many ways. So both paths start in the same place. Okay, you want to fix yourself. You want to save your family. But you start off angry, in denial, depressed. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy for a reason. It's a breaking of a commitment that you made for life, a commitment that you feel deep within your soul. You may have never thought you've known love until you had kids or what was challenged with your life. It's something that you worked for. It's something that you sacrificed for. That's a part of the commitment. That is a part of what it means to be a man that is married to a woman. Whether you did that bad or good, that is part of your commitment. That is going to hurt. And you are in pain now. When you're in pain, you're desperate. And when you're desperate, you can do a lot of crazy stuff. So if you stay on this path, this is where it gets dangerous. And this is where I've seen men, 10 years, they come to me and they're still depressed. It's even worse if they're still angry because then they don't come to me. They just spin off and get a bunch of yes men to get into their anger, judgment, and blame. Why this is tragic. And I'm going to tell you, show me an example of it not being, and we might have different standards for this. But man, if you stay angry, if you stay in denial, if you stay depressed, if you stay vindictive, if you stay hateful, you are guaranteeing a more rocky relationship for your kids. If you stay angry, if you stay depressed, if you stay full of blame, full of judgment, full of revenge, in the immediate legal process that almost has to happen, you will inevitably do some stupid things that make things much harder for the legal process. Meaning, you're going to waste your lawyer's time, which is going to cost a lot of money. If you think that that's not going to happen, man, it will. You are going to do things reactive, which end up in text messages or emails or some written form or some sort of recordable form that could end up ruining your reputation in court. The American court system already has problems. Now, my attorney disagrees with me on that, but there are problems that are for men, no doubt. Why would you do anything to hurt that more? And I'm telling you that your anger, your reactivity, your resentment is only going to help screw that up. Okay. If we're going through our own mentality and moving on and we take anger and depression towards that, I'm going to tell you something. You can look good. Society can reward you. You can do all the same things that, divorced people do, guys and girls post on social media about how much better they are. You can do all those things and get people to reward you for it. You can make money. You can do a lot of stuff. But look, man, if you're only fostering a poor environment for your children, not giving them a way to manage this, you're screwing up their relationships for the rest of their lives. You're not going to have stability to the trauma that's already done to them that is screwing up that's going to be problems in their future. So when you're whatever age you are, 50 or 60, and they're young adults and running into relationship problems, man, you're not going to, one, be strong to help lead them out of it and teach them the right thing when they can listen to you and they're asking for your help, but also you helped create those relationship problems with them. You're not allowing your ex to be able to move on and get the help that she does need if she does need it. Anger, resentment, blame are big blinders for people so that they don't have to look at this stuff. This is huge. You're causing so many problems by staying in this thing because, and here's what it is. I've been coaching for 15 years, right? When a man is challenged to look at something painful that he has to take responsibility for, that he is at fault for, and he has to fix it, not just look at it, but fix it, it's real easy to go for anger and resentment and to stay in that sort of confusion and have it make sense for a little bit because people are rewarding you for it. And that's disturbing about the men's development industry. That's the opposite of development. It's really sad. So then we get into the path of fixing yourself. So this is the road less traveled. I'm going to tell you right now, man. Road Less Traveled is actually a great book if you ever read it. I believe by Scott Beck. And in the path to fixing yourself and your family is long. It's thankless. It's not going to be immediate. There are going to be days. I'm going to tell you right now, like you might be going through pain and depression now. And I'm going to tell you it's going to take anywhere from 12 to 24 months. You're like, I don't have 12 to 24 months. That doesn't mean that 12 months is not going to be filled with good days. You're going to have good days, but you're going to have days where you're going to be angry. You're going to have days where you don't know what to do. You're going to have days where everything's falling apart. You're going to have to face your doubts. You're going to have to face your fears. You're going to have to face things that you covered up deep within yourself. You're going to have to let go of the judgments. You're going to have to let go of the blame. And it's not just going like, oh, my ex, tried to hit me with her car or whatever, or my ex made up these lies. I guess I can forgive her. No, you're going to have to go deep within yourself to actually do that. And you can. And there's so many tools to do that. Before any of my programs existed, all of religion, all of humanity has had answers for this. And, not that I'm saying you have to be religious in any way, because I'm not. You have to look at this problem going deep within yourself. And it's an amazing, amazing experience. You'll look at things you never wanted to look at ever. And in that, you're going to fix things that were amazing in you. And there are things that can't be sold, and there are things that can't really be talked about. And that may sound really abstract, but the bottom line is if you want a good relationship with your children, if you want to do what is best for your children in this situation, and you want to live a good life and have relationships and inner peace afterwards, you have to be able to work on it. And it starts with the stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow, which is your legal battle. It starts with there. And I'm going to show you how you do that. So what does this mean? And what do you do now? Okay, so you might be thinking like, how does all this help me, right? And obviously I'm a coach. I work with people. The way I work with people is on calls and with my course material. We unify on the course material that I put together. And then on the calls, we discuss it. And there's 30 hours of calls a week that we do for the different programs that we have. You show up for like 90 minutes is usually the average of what people do. But there's a lot of calls because there's a lot of people and a lot of different time zones. But the legal process, if you do not take the path of fixing yourself and working on yourself. Look, I already told you, the American court system has a lot of things that go against men. Why would you make that harder by doing the one thing of what American men go to jail for? They go to jail for greed, sex. They go to jail for anger. Why would you not take care of your anger? Why would you not start fixing the stupid stuff in it? Now, anger is good. I'm all for it. I have a big relationship with anger, but why would you let that affect something as important for a law that gets made about how you're going to see your kids, how you're going to have to pay child support, how you're going to get to parent them, who you're going to be allowed to bring around your kids, how you see them? Do you have to see them with a U.S. Marshal, watching you the whole time? Do you have supervised visitation? Like, what is happening here? Why would you allow that to happen? And I'm telling you, man, people who wreck their court cases, it's not just bad luck. It's that they allowed themselves to be ignorant and fill themselves with anger. And I'm an example of that. Like, why did I hold on to blame with the mother of my kids? She did a lot of things wrong, and so did I, but she did a lot of things wrong. We could all agree on how she did those things wrong. I could list them out just like she would do with me, right? But what did that make us do? It made us keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting, until finally she lands me in jail and gets her way. And even then, she felt she wasn't even done until we could both amend that situation. Fatherhood. What does it mean for fatherhood? You have to start thinking, and we're not going to be perfect. It's not as simple as taking the red pill or the blue pill. It's a daily choice that we have to make, that we have to work towards, that we're going to make mistakes on. But in fatherhood, man, are we going to raise our kids with being angry at their mother? And you can be angry now. You should be angry now. Depends on what the situation is, but I'm thinking about a few choice clients. I mean, they have the right to be angry. They should be angry. But how do we do that as a father? How do we not let that affect our kids? How do we show up 100%? How do we show up and our kids are crying when they see us because they're afraid of us from what their mother told them about us? Or they're crying when we're dropping them off. How do we handle those situations? You need to be around other men that do that. And this is really what I want to bring to this board. This is why I'm doing this presentation. This is why I put out the material. This is why like so much of it is for free, is because I want men to start going like, hey, we don't need to be like on fire killing, our baby mama and her reputation or whatever so that we can, have our pride back. Like, we need to fix those things, and sometimes you need to walk in pain. Your relationships with women, like, I'm somebody who is not MGTOW, and which is men go their own way. If you don't know about it, maybe that's for the best. I don't know, but that's my opinion on it, right? It's not my thing. I've met some MGTOW guys that are great dudes. I've also met the vast majority of them, which seem totally insane and stuck in their anger and not moving past it. But if you want relationships with women, man, why would you not fix these things to guarantee that it never happened again? And I think about this with myself because I was a misfit when my oldest kid's mom and I started our relationship. I was nuts. I got what happens in those situations, right? And later on, when I met my ex, is an amazing woman. There's so many things amazing about her. I mean, my life got so much better in that period, the 7 years that we were together. And she has a ton to do with that. But there were problems that were not fixed. And yeah, sure, a lot of them, especially legally, manifested in her. A lot of them manifested in her big time. And legally, a lot didn't manifest in me. But emotionally, huge. Emotionally, there were things where I didn't do right and so on. And I want to fix those things. Why? So my relationships in the future can be better. Denial is such a cunning thing because it feels good at the time, but it guarantees suffering for later. And most importantly, the thing here is your relationship with masculinity. Your relationship with who you are as a man is amazing. Things like your anger, things like your sex, things like violence, things like your quick decisions, things like your determination, things that are masculine by nature or by how you access them are not bad, but we need to learn how to use them. I am somebody that uses anger on a daily basis, and it's a beautiful thing. Yet we don't build a relationship with that. And in building a relationship with that means that we're going to experience it, we're going to do it, we're going to get into trouble with it, but we need to be able to fix those things. And you were born with this awesome thing. So this is what this road is. And I just want to review here really quick, is that this was the introduction. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the legal stuff, and that's crazy complex. Crazy complex. That's insane, right? How to find a lawyer, how to switch your lawyer, how to know what lawyers to watch out for. But you're halfway through your case and you've given your lawyer $20,000. What happens if you need to switch that lawyer? What do you do? How to prepare for your cases, how to deal with her lawyer, how to handle the etiquette, how to save time on that. That's massive. How the court systems work. And I'm not a lawyer. I want you to talk to a lawyer, but this is a guide for helping you do that, right? If you don't need a lawyer, that's cool. What do you do if you don't need a lawyer? That's actually if you, one, I'm going to tell you right now, to do it without a lawyer, divorce and custody, a lot of things can go wrong, and I don't recommend it. But there are guys in our groups who've done that or saved time with parts of that, and it can be done. A lot of times it ends up wrong, but if you do not have guidance on that, man, you're walking into a trap. And there's actually a guy in our groups who is now hiring a lawyer, and he's doing everything he can to get that, because he tried to do it without a lawyer for X amount of months and realized the pains and problems within that. So pretty crazy stuff. So then, we're gonna talk about all those things in tomorrow's presentation and so on. And man, when we get into mental illness, this is a huge thing. I can't tell you how many people go, man, she's a narcissist, or this is proven, she's borderline. If those things are true, then you need help as much as she needs help. And we're going to talk about that. Like, if you are walking into a relationship with a borderline person, which I have done, and it's not like some internet diagnosis. It's not like my therapist thinks that, and your therapist might be telling you that just to help with your therapeutic path, but it's not an official diagnosis. But if you're going into a situation with somebody who is diagnosed as borderline, that means they went to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, a social worker, a therapist, and that therapist who worked with them said that they're borderline or a narcissist or whatever. You're not diagnosing it yourself, then you have some problems yourself, which made you say yes to those. Socially, I get it. They did everything wrong, but you do not want to have those relationships. It's kind of like somebody who continues to date an alcoholic or a drug addict. There's a problem with codependency that person has, that on the surface, they didn't do anything bad. They just cared and loved for the person, but there's a special problem that goes in with somebody who's consistently dating drug addicts and so on. So those things are there, and we need to look at all of that. And that's not saying that you're at fault, but you're the only one that you can change. You're the only person that you can work with. And that's really what I want to share in this. So I want to open it up for questions and answers now. This is how the rest of the presentations are going to go. This part will not be recorded or broadcasted to the public in any way, shape, or form. The questions that we're doing it on Facebook is you're going to have to write them in. If we do a Zoom call or something of that nature, then that's a little bit different, because we could talk and interact. Perhaps, on the third or fourth or fifth or whatever day of the workshop, we may switch to Zoom as a platform because it adds more interaction between us. But in this Q&A, we want to kind of talk about what your situation is and what's going on. And this is actually, the presentation part is valuable as you might see it, and as valuable as it might become in the next couple of days. The best part is really the Q&A part. So I'm going to stop the recording, and we are going to go to that, and let's get started.